Welcome to ACC Nation. That's Will. I'm Jim. And our special guest, the publisher of Wahoos 24/7, Jacquie Franciulli, is joining us. And thank you for coming on and talking a little bit about the ACC.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about this homecoming of sorts for Bronco Mendenhall, BYU and UVA. That's the most immediate thing on everybody's mind.
Right.
Odds makers open with BYU as a 1-point favorite. It's up to 2.5 now. Boy, big numbers. The game point total over under is 63.5. So I would say that everybody is anticipating a shootout. Let's hear your thoughts on what to expect out of this game that's coming up.
You know, when I looked at this game and I'm looking at the matchups, I'm thinking I could see where people see there's going to be a shootout, especially when you look at how Virginia's defense has been playing. They've been in this mentality of we're going to bend but not break. So you're going to expect points when you have that mentality. But then I saw what BYU did last week, where the offense didn't have the best of games, and their rushing game, which has been what many have said is going to be a strength, hasn't been quite as efficient the last few games for them either. So I could see where in a situation where Virginia comes out quickly and doesn't stutter, I could see Virginia being able to control the game and BYU not being able to keep up with the offensive shootout. That's if UVA really comes up quickly in that situation. Now, the flip side, I can see BYU establishing that run game, since we all know UVA's defense struggles against the run. And then that could be the other side of the story, and we can end up having a shootout. I think that's the key here. UVA needs to start quickly to kind of lead the game and then force BYU to make mistakes, forcing them to go in the air, and then that's where you get more of the mistakes. So I could see why this is such a close game, and that's why the spread is so close, because you're relying on UVA to start quickly, which hasn't been their forte very well in this last few years.
So one of the things, and we'll get into a little more detail here, but one of the things that strikes me right up front, Jacquie, is we're talking about a defense and offense that defense on BYU's part, offense on UVA's part, that neither team really has seen the likes of. So I'm really looking forward to, and I think you just laid it out there. If UVA can come out early and strike and keep running that score up, it's going to be entertaining, to say the least.
Yeah.
Is there a particular area that you see on the offense of UVA that is a weak point for BYU?
Well, honestly, when you have a quarterback like Brennan Armstrong, I feel like you could just attack the secondary. I think that at this point, when you look at any game, you're just going to say, well, you know what? On paper, it might not be their weakest, but when you have a guy like Brennan Armstrong throwing the ball in those tight windows like he is, to guys like Dontavian Wicks, Keeton Thompson, Billy Kemp, all those guys, I'll just say that that's their strength, and they can attack the BYU secondary. I think the key to this game is going to be getting out early. And then honestly, what I loved in that Georgia Tech game was that they were able to run the ball. That was the most rushing yards since last season's game against Boston College in the ACC conference game for these guys. And that was great. And that's what happens when you have a balanced attack. You're able to control the ball a little bit better, and you're able to do those explosive plays. And Brennan Armstrong looked great. His knee looked healthy. And I think that's a way to beat BYU and also keep them off the field a little longer, so your defense can take a breather, especially because in the altitude, you're also having that to factor in. So I think, honestly, just give Brennan Armstrong free reign here. He's having a remarkable season. I am shocked that he hasn't been receiving much national attention, but honestly, I just came from covering the Florida Gators, and it took Kyle Trask, I don't know how many games for people to even put him in the Heisman conversation when I was covering them. So it takes a few nudges for the national media to see a quarterback doing well.
So you gave me the perfect intro there, and which is just ideal. Before I pass this off to Will, saw on USA Today that Brennan Armstrong is on a list of people who are being talked about as a Heisman Trophy candidate, and he was number 8 on that list, which is new. He has not, as you have pointed out, has not been getting the publicity or the recognition maybe that he deserves for everything he's been doing. Will?
Well, let's be real here. The game kicks off at 10:15, so we need entertaining to keep us, awake for that. But Jacquie, you talked about Brennan Armstrong running the ball, and obviously he seems a lot healthier now, coming off of that knee injury against Illinois. Mm-hmm. Could we see those gaudy pass numbers come down a little bit with him, being more of a runner?
No, I think you're going to see a good mix and a good balance. I think Robert and I is going to see, well, when you have receivers like Dontavian Wicks and Keeton Thompson kind of have the ability to get up and get those balls, and they're still having issues in the red zone. Although they did a little bit better against Georgia Tech, they're still having some issues making consistency in that red zone. And when you have guys like Jelani Woods, that's going to be your threat. So I could see still, Brennan Armstrong having those gaudy numbers, maybe not 500 yards of passing, but 300 is pretty decent for a game. So I think you're going to still see him. I just don't think you're going to see gaudy numbers as far as how many pass attempts he's going to have. I think those are going to be the numbers that go down, but he's doing such a good job of picking his receivers and going for those big explosive plays. And his wide receivers, Coach Hagens has done an amazing job with these receivers. Just seeing the development that he's been able to have in that room throughout the years. So I think you're just still going to see that. The only thing you're going to see is you're going to see a more balanced offense that's going to be able to stay on the field longer. So you might have an ability to not have all these shootouts and have all these, I talked to Brennan Armstrong's mom, and she was saying, like, these kids are just giving me heart palpitations watching my son and having him to come back. I talked to her shortly after the Louisville game, and she's saying my son just keeps getting me stressed out. So hopefully they don't do that to their parents anymore. But I could see their numbers just coming down a little bit as far as pass attempts, but I would be shocked if Anai takes that away, because honestly, that is what Brennan Armstrong's strength is. You're going to have him, because then the defense, you're going to keep them honest now. Brennan Armstrong can, go away and go for a 20-yard dash, or he can kill you and get you a 30-yard touchdown. So I would be shocked if Anai switched that up.
You touched on something I actually wanted to get into a little later, but we might as well bring it up now. Is just the coaching staff. Marcus Hagens did an outstanding job of developing the receivers. Garrett Touge on the offensive line, Jason Beck, with the quarterbacks we've seen, Bryce Perkins go from JUCO kid to the NFL, and Brennan Armstrong seems to be on that same trajectory. Do you get a sense when you talk to recruits that they noticed a development of the Virginia offense?
So after this last game against Georgia Tech, I made an effort to only really talk to offensive recruits, because I was kind of curious about that, especially because on Monday in particular, Bronco Mendenhall was asked about Brennan Armstrong's work and how you're seeing all his numbers pay off. And he had a great answer. And it was just literally, you put it on a wall, frame it, and do as your recruiting pitch every single time a quarterback comes to visit you. He was saying that Anai and Beck have done this, not just with Brennan Armstrong. They did it with Kurt Benkert and Bryce Perkins. These are, it's kind of funny. I was talking to my husband, who's not really interested in football. So I don't know why he keeps talking to me about these things, but I was telling him, it's funny because Kurt came in, he broke UVA records. Then Bryce Perkins came in and broke Kurt's records that broke UVA records. And now we have Brennan Armstrong that broke Bryce's records or Kurt's records. So Jason Beck's going to be, are you going to come in here and break Brennan Armstrong's record? So you're going to be number one in UVA. So that's a great recruiting pitch. And honestly, that's what I've been hearing. I talked to Walker White, a quarterback out of Little, Arkansas, who came to visit for the Duke game. So when they won 48-0, and he had plenty of things to say about that. He loved the fact that he can tell that Jason Beck can develop quarterbacks. He already knows. He says, I can see it in his resume. I can see it with my own eyes. I can see what Brennan Armstrong is able to do. But what was interesting in talking to him was he also mentioned the offensive line development. He said, I can see the O-lines developing well. So if I come to UVA, not only will I develop well, but the guys in front of me will develop well. So that means I'll be protected. So recruits are taking notice of how this offense is being developed. And then you've got, several wide receivers who I talked to, a couple of them from the 757 area, which, is an area that UVA is really trying to get back to getting that hold and keeping kids in state. and they're noticing Dontavian Wicks. They're noticing Keeton Thompson. These guys are saying, like, hey, not only are they developing wide receivers well, but they're developing quarterbacks that can pass me the ball. Because at the end of the day, they're not just looking at their own position, they're looking at the other position. So yeah, for sure. Like this week, I've talked to 4 or 5 different recruits that have told me the exact same thing. If they're wide receivers, they mention the quarterback and the wide receivers. And if they're quarterbacks, they mention the O-line and the quarterback. So recruits are taking notice. Now, this is a great opportunity for UVA just to build momentum with that. Show them film. Show them like, hey, this is Brennan Armstrong in high school. This is Brennan Armstrong in year 1 as a starter. This is Brennan Armstrong right now. Show them that path, because honestly, we can talk about facilities. We can talk about uniforms. I remember the Oregon uniforms was a big deal. We can talk about all those things. Film doesn't lie.
Good point. How much fun is it to watch Keeton Thompson on the football field? I just amazed at some of the things he's been able to do out there.
Oh man, it's incredible. I'm actually working on a long form feature on him, and I was talking to his mom, and she joked that she just wants to put him in bubble wrap, because he's been through a lot. For a guy who came out of college, he committed to Dan Mullen and Brian Johnson at Mississippi State. He went through 3 head coaches at Mississippi State, and then he transferred to UVA. And, there's a 4-star recruit out of New Orleans, and he just, he had a lot of dreams. And when he came to UVA, he hurt himself during the quarterback battle. And to see what he's been able to do with the football player position is quite incredible. I think, we all look at his stats. I think he's one of the top players in the country for his rushing yard, for how much rushing yards and receiving yards he has. I think he's one of the few players who have that high of amount. He's such a talent. And, I like, there was one day, I think it was the Miami game, he did this one-handed catch, and I'm thinking, that man just caught that ball with his cast hand. And I'm like, how did you keep that? And then he got tackled on top of that. But I think what really intrigues me about Keeton Thompson is his attitude. And, there was one play, actually, it's the Miami game again. He was on the opposite side of the field, and Brennan Armstrong was going in for a run. He ran from one side of the field to the other to make the tackle, to make the block, so Armstrong could get an extra 5 yards rushing. That is the player that stands out, because Keeton Thompson, we can rave about all his stats. It's all the dirty work he does that you don't talk about. That's what makes him a better player in my mind. And I think, I would be shocked if NFL scouts don't take notice of that as well.
I'm going to go back a little bit for you, take you back.
Okay.
You've seen the ACC years ago. You're seeing it now. But in between, you've seen the SEC.
Right.
So there's mindsets. Talk to us about the mindset between the two conferences, and if you can, tell us how the SEC views the ACC.
Well, I can start with that one.
Okay.
The SEC has a certain confidence about them, maybe a little bit more of arrogance on them. They do feel like they're the best conference in the country. And, I don't want to say they call the ACC the little brother, but that's kind of, they don't respect the ACC very much, apart from Clemson. That's pretty much been the mentality of a lot of folks that I knew in the SEC. I will say UVA gained a lot of respect in that Orange Bowl when they faced Florida, because they didn't just roll over and die. They competed, and they did a really good job about it, especially when they didn't have a lot of their DBs. I remember they were short-staffed on that secondary. And it was actually ironic, because I know I did cover UVA for a little bit before, and I would warn people all the time, like, you guys are dismissing UVA. And I'm watching film like, yeah, I don't know if I should dismiss Bryce Perkins, especially with the way Florida was defending dual threat quarterbacks at that point. But so they don't view the ACC very, very well, apart from certain teams. And even now you can tell with the college football playoff conversation, they're even saying, should a undefeated Wake Forest get in? You can already tell that they don't have the much respect for the conference. Although when you look at the SEC, sometimes you think what's going on in the SEC East and Pacific specifically. As far as covering the ACC and the SEC, there's certain things that are very different. I would say the fandom is, I want to say more passionate, because all fandoms are passionate. but they do have a shorter, line. So shorter leash is the coach as well. So for example, you saw Ed Orgeron. He got fired, and he was, he just won the national title a few years ago. There is a shorter leash on the SEC, and they do recruit a little differently, to put it mildly, but they also recruit different types of athletes as well. Something that I think UVA started to do that at wide receiver. You've seen how Coach Hagens and them have really going after more physical, and they're with bigger frames as far as wideouts. And that's something that I was seeing Florida do as well. So that is, offensively, I think what UVA is doing is what I was seeing with Florida as well. They're, obviously you can't compare their recruitment because UVA has a lot more criteria that they're going after. When you're recruiting for UVA, you're dealing with admissions too. Although Florida has high admissions, you can't compare them to UVA and some of their criteria they're dealing with. So, but as far as physically and what frame they're looking for, both schools are actually going for the same type of guy right now. And I could see that with the SEC. The only thing is their guys in the trenches are much bigger than the SEC. And they're bigger, but the way they're built, they're still not losing speed. So that is the one thing that I've noticed. And I think a lot of the SEC schools have put in a lot of effort in nutrition and a lot of effort in their strength and conditioning programs. And that's also got to do with a lot of the resources that they have. Covering University of Florida, they're tied to Gatorade a lot. So they have that much of those resources too. So I think the SEC is further ahead in those aspects. But the ACC is catching up. So, but yeah, I do see some things like that are very different between the conferences.
It's interesting to get that perspective. I appreciate you sharing that because it was an honest look from both sides. And I think spot on. I'm going to completely stray here for a moment, which I often do.
Yeah, it's not hard.
I have to ask you something. I have been studying slowly, so please don't throw anything past me here, Spanish. And I was told, because I was initially interested in learning Portuguese.
Okay.
I was told, don't even go there because it is a very difficult language to learn. So I'm looking through YouTube, and who is just whipping through Portuguese. And it was like, I'm going like, okay, there's a story. I want to hear it.
Sure. So my mom's actually from Brazil. So my mom is from Brazil and my dad's from Italy, and actually Portuguese is my first language. So so we speak Portuguese at home with my family, and I speak Portuguese a little with my kids. So yes, that's where Portuguese comes from. So it's not too big of a story, but yeah, my mom is from there, and they moved to Miami, Florida. So we're all the melting pot goes there. But yeah, it's interesting because my husband's from Virginia, and his family's from Alabama and Virginia. So he started picking up a few words of Portuguese. But yeah, I would agree with what people told you. Portuguese is one of the hardest language to learn. But the good thing about if you know Portuguese, you understand all the other Romantic languages. I've had friends who speak Spanish that can't pick up all Portuguese words, but those that speak Portuguese can pick most of Spanish and for example, my dad's from Italy. I can understand mostly Italian, so as well, and I could speak it a little bit. I haven't spoken it in a while, but been able to speak in it because of Portuguese, because that's still fresh in my mind.
Interesting. So it was worth me asking this story. I like that. So, and that leads to the next thing that I always ask about, and that's food.
Okay.
Since now that you've told me that you have that Brazilian background and also Italy, what type of foods are you like the most, and that you absolutely must have?
Oh wow, that I love food. You have to love food when you're coming from my family. Like Christmas is one of the best times of the year for us. We like whatever you hear about, Italian Christmas Eve dinners is accurate. But what my mom used to do is she would mix Brazilian food and Italian food. So we always have the big porchetta, the big pig, like literally the pigs on the dining room table.
Wow.
We would have homemade pasta. We would have these pies that had all these type of meats. So like cut up prosciutto, cut up bresaola, cut up coppa, all in this pie. But some of my favorite foods too is like not even holiday related. My mom, there's always, every Latin culture has black beans and rice. So my mom would make something called feijoada, which is black beans and rice, but it does like dried meat in it too. So she would always make that on a Sunday. And then she would always make steak, but the cut of steak is a Brazilian cut. We call it Brazilian cut because they use all the part of the cow, all the part of the pig, and it's called the sirloin, so like the picanha. You can get it in any one of those. It's called a churrascaria. Those like Texas de Brazil that come bring you the meats on the stick. She would do that on their grill outside. Even if like my parents live in Canada now, and she would go outside in the middle of a snowstorm with her jacket and will still grill this outside because it can't be done inside. This is quality meat. She's like, no, I'm not going to waste my money. This is going to be grilled. She does that with black beans and rice, the feijoada. So yeah, that's probably, my mom would always joke, growing up in Brazil, that was the cheapest meal. You pay like maybe like $10 for it if you convert the currency. And now she says, I go to churrascaria and I have to pay $50 for a meal, but that was one of the cheapest meals for her growing up. So yeah, that's what we eat. We eat black beans and rice and meat. And then whenever my dad takes control of the menu, it's either like the big monstrous pig or some good pasta. But I don't like sweet pasta sauces. It's like my pet peeve is when this pasta sauce is sweet because my husband would add a little bit of sugar in it. I'm like, why are you adding sugar? So it has to be, I like spicier pasta sauces or like white pasta sauces are my favorite.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, hey, Will, I know whose house we need to be invited to at some point.
I wish my son wasn't as picky of eater. My daughter loves eating everything, but my son he like chooses chicken nuggets over the pasta that I made, and I'm like, it breaks my heart.
I was gonna say that for the record, I have grilled with a jacket on. Maybe nothing that exquisite. It's more like hamburgers, but I try to fit in with my Minnesota culture here. So, but let me stray back to football. And I mean, to be perfectly honest, the defense has not been very good, but the strong spot, even going back to when you were covering the Who's the first time, has always been linebacker. And even this year, it's still pretty good. And even seeing some of the first years, like Wes Weeks, for example, someone that come to mind. How is it that this team can just consistently develop linebackers like this?
Well, they're doing a good job recruiting these guys and identifying these guys. I actually did a story on that today. I asked Bronco, so I do something every Sunday where I sit down with my subscribers and I rewatch the game. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I noticed was Deshaun Perry's last rush to the Jeff Sims in that Georgia Tech game. And, I actually covered Deshaun Perry's recruitment because Florida was kind of sniffing around him towards the end of his recruitment. But he was committed to UVA. And I remember him and I was like, he was going to be a project in the SEC, but he's going to do well in the ACC, and just seeing that progression of what he's done. And I think it's just the way their defensive scheme just works for linebackers. And again, this Kelly Poppinga has done a great job developing. At the end of the day, I've covered coaches that bring in talent and don't know how to develop them. I covered Jim McElwain at Florida, and it was frustrating to see some of the talent that he would bring, and you wouldn't see the trajectory that you expect. And these were 4- or 5-star athletes. And you see what Kelly Poppinga has done during his tenure here at UVA. And I think that's honestly the difference, is that he gets good recruits that fit the system and is able to develop their talent. I can't stress enough how much development is such a big key, because I've seen the other side. I've seen 4- or 5-star guys fizzle out because they weren't developed properly. And you can see that at UVA, that in that position especially, it's not a problem.
All right, so I mean, the conversation could keep going for a long time, but I know we only have so much time left for you. So we're going to transition over to basketball real quick, and I just want to start with the two incoming transfers that are for this season. Jaden Gardner, obviously from ECU, a lot of people are very high on him. Armand Franklin from Indiana, who looks to probably be a perfect fit for this team because he has, a background with the pack line at Indiana. So let's just start there. What are the trajectory for those two this season?
I was able to watch the scrimmage. Gosh, was it 2 weeks ago now? Everything kind
I
of
think
gets a
so,
blur.
yeah.
So Gardner, I'm looking here in my notes. He had 18 points and he was 7 for 12 shooting, 4 to 6 on free throws. I really liked how they used him. They ran the offense a lot through him, and he was a really good physical presence underneath the glass. And I think that was really nice seeing that. This team is going to struggle from the 3-point line. And I think
Mhm.
using Gardner is going to be what they use. I think the key for this team, honestly, is the guys in the second year guys, third year guys, those making those big leaps. But having a guy like Gardner and Franklin there, they're going to be able to kind of help you in that time of transition to get those guys, better. But Gardner was just such a physical guy. I was really impressed by that. I was really impressed by just his presence and what he was able to do. For example, he had, I think it was one missed shot where he jumped up, hit the rim, and he was right back up, out muscled. I can't remember who he was, but out muscled the guy, brought it down and went back up and cleaned up his own mess. I think that's what I liked about that, was that he had the presence of mind and the physicality to do that. And honestly, in the ACC, you're going to need that. I think UVA is going to be able to do much with him, especially in the beginning because right now there's a lot of question marks offensively on this team. So I think that would be the big thing, at least in the beginning of the season.
So one of the other players I'm very intrigued by, and I hope he stays healthy the entire season, is Keeton Cedric. I mean, he has a lot of talent, but obviously between getting sick multiple times last year, it just was kind of a rough season. But I think when you talk about the way this offense is going to flow, he's going to need to be very, healthy and, be productive, because I feel like he could be in for a big year this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Shedrick is one of the ones that I feel like needs a breakout season if UVA wants to have a successful season. I think, if you look at this team, I think you have a lot of question marks offensively, like I said. And I think Shedrick is one of those. If he can move to the next level, I think this team can compete for the ACC. I think this team will have little less problems from offensively if he has more consistency to him, and plays better defensively. I wasn't in the scrimmage. Again, I was covering SEC for such long, so that was the first time I was seeing U of A basketball in person. And that was the one thing I was wanting to see, is what he could do defensively too. Because when I remember covering UVA, during, I covered UVA during the Joe Harris era, and so I covered them winning their first. I still remember telling London Parantis that the last time that they won the AC championship, the gas was 36 cents a gallon. So I remember back then, but I think UVA can compete for the ACC regular season title and move on to the ACC tournament if Shedrick is one of those guys that steps up. I really do think that they can compete with him, and I think just having more reps and having more comfortable defensively as well can really help.
Okay, so let me ask you about one more player from that scrimmage, and that's Reese Speakman. I feel like a lot of people are pegging him as being someone who could be a big contributor this year. Obviously, we saw in his first year he's already there defensively, but can he make that big step offensively?
Sorry, you broke up there. I couldn't hear the
sorry. Reese Speakman and his offense, and can he be more of a factor on the offense this year?
Yeah, I think he was double figures in the scrimmage. I believe he had 17 or 18 points. When I saw him, I saw a player that had confidence. When he was out there on the court, it looked like I hate using the word swagger, but he did have it. It was just, he was doing well. He was very confident. He was making plays on both sides of the ball. He just looked comfortable attacking the rim. And he was really good at scoring on a fast break.
Jacquie, we want to thank you for coming on ACC Nation, talking a little bit about Virginia basketball, football, food, and Portuguese and roots. Hey, it's all good. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thanks, Jacquie.
Thank you very much, or obrigado.
Thanks for joining us on ACC Nation. Follow us by subscribing on your favorite podcast or streaming radio platform and on YouTube. We'd appreciate a 5-star rating while you're there. Visit our homepage at accnation.net and support us via PayPal. Keep up with the latest by following us on Google News. You can find ACC Nation on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Reddit, and Pinterest. Follow Will at Will's World MN, and I'm at ACC The Q. Cheers.
Score.